Hi all, my name is Ryan and welcome to my channel What the Pop, where we discuss pop culture in general and Buffy a lot. If you like what I do, please like, subscribe and click the notification bell to be notified whenever I upload a new video. If you have friends that like Buffy, please share it with them. It all helps the algorithm. The usual spoiler alert. If you haven't seen Buffy at least once all the way through, I may talk about things in each episode that relate to future plot points. So if you don't like spoilers, I suggest you subscribe and come back after you've watched it all. Today we're discussing Season 1, Episode 12, Prophecy Girl, the Season 1 finale. A plot summary. Xander is practicing asking Buffy out on Willow and the whole thing is super cringy. Cordelia is making out with Kevin, while Buffy is doing what may be my favourite bit of slow-mo fall fight choreography in 7 seasons of the show. She stakes a vamp, her third of the night. Giles is reading the prophecies contained within the Pergamum Codex when the earth trembles, and the Master has this hilarious response.
What do you think? 5.1?
Next morning, Buffy enters the library to ask about the increase in vampire activity, and Giles is still too focused on the Pergamum Codex. After biology, Willow disappears so Xander can ask Buffy out, and she says, "Ew, gross." Okay, she doesn't say that. She says she doesn't feel the same, and Xander exhibits the douchiness that we've come to expect of him in his interactions with women. Giles calls Angel and organises a secret rendezvous. When Jenny walks in and is all, "I'm not an idiot, what's happening?" Willow and Kevin say they'll help Cordy with the sound system for the dance. Can we just pause here and acknowledge that Cordelia actually got rid of Mitch after he got beat up in the last episode and moved on to this very square-jawed specimen. She is ruthless. Willow sees Xander all mopey about being rejected, and she says hell to the no to being his plan B. Buffy overhears Angel and Giles talking about the prophecy and learns she's going to die, then delivers this heartbreaking line as only Sarah Michelle Gellar can.
Giles, I'm 16 years old. I don't want to die.
Buffy tries to get her mum to take her away. Joyce got her a pretty dress instead. Everyone in the audiovisual club and Kevin has been slaughtered. Snyder's death count as principal is not going well. Willow and Cordelia found them. Buffy goes to console Willow, resolves to stop the carnage. Xander seeks out Angel so they can help Buffy. Knocks out Giles, who says he's going in her place. This is the 5th time Giles has been knocked out so far. I'm surprised he doesn't have brain damage. Buffy heads out, gets greeted by the the Anointed One, and goes to the Master's lair. Master catches her, drains her blood. Oh crap. She was the key to his escape. He drops her in a pool of water and she drowns. Master is free, goes topside. Three-headed penis monster breaks through from the Hellmouth and attacks Willow, Jenny, Cordelia and Giles. Xander and Angel find Buffy. Angel has no breath. Xander has to perform CPR. Yay, Buffy is saved. Buffy feels strong, confronts the Master, kicks his ass, dumps him on a convenient wooden spike. So this is my favourite episode of Season 1 and one of my favourite episodes of Buffy. Written and directed by Joss, it perfectly wraps the first season, drawing all of the character development over the last 11 episodes into a cohesive whole. As such, if Buffy hadn't been renewed for a second season, it would have stood as a complete story arc, with nothing left unresolved except for those damn mantis eggs. From a story perspective, this episode is remarkably well layered, with all the characters going through internal conflict that's as important as the external conflict with the Master. What's more, a lot of this internal conflict is emoted rather than just spoken, which is a testament to the acting prowess of the cast. From the wide-eyed in love look that Willow has for Xander at the start, to the scared and vulnerable girl on her bed, Buffy's meltdown at learning of her fate, to her resolve to face it and strength in overcoming it, Giles, Xander and Angel's concern over Buffy. Many of these moments are expressed in looks and body language or only minimal dialogue. In terms of story beats, this episode does a fantastic job of conveying important information in action rather than in a plain exposition dump. For instance, When they revealed the details of the Pergamum Codex, that Buffy would face the Master and she would die, it wasn't just Giles or someone reading it from a book, or someone reciting it, or just the translation showing up on a computer screen somewhere. It was in a heated discussion between Angel and Giles that Buffy overhears. It not only makes the story beat more natural and far more interesting, it makes its delivery and impact more effective. Now, I do have a couple of minor things that I dislike about this episode, mainly because they're clearly there to force a moment when a simple script tweak could have saved it. The biggest one in this episode is Angel having no breath, and therefore Xander having to be the one to perform CPR. As I pointed out, this was set up last episode with Angel being able to turn off the gas because he doesn't need to breathe. The problem with this explanation is that vampires do have breath. One, they talk, which requires breathing, and two, we see them smoke, which requires inhalation and exhalation of breath. They may not need the oxygen from the breath to live, but they are clearly capable of inhalation and exhalation, which is all you would need for CPR. This could have been solved with a simple script tweak. Angel, she's not breathing. Xander, but if she drowned, there's a shot. CPR. Angel, what's CPR? We learn that Angel basically removed himself from society when his soul was restored. Now, CPR didn't really make it into the public domain until the 70s, long after he had disappeared. So it wouldn't be a shock that Angel wouldn't know what CPR is. This would have enabled Xander to still have his save the girl moment, but without having to force something that doesn't make sense into the script. Buffy has been on a journey of growth since the first episode, when she embraced her slayerness to take down Luke the Vessel and prevent the prophecy around the harvest from coming true. That moment comes full circle and is reflected in this episode with Buffy finding out about the prophecy from the Pergamum Codex. Like in Welcome to the Hellmouth, Buffy quits. Here, however, it's far more real, far more personal. In the first episode, Buffy had no real fear of death. She merely feared being rejected by society, getting kicked out of school, losing all her friends, and ending up alone. Here, the stakes are raised. It's no longer a case of Buffy may be alone. It's that she realizes she is destined to die. She realizes that Slayers don't have a long life, something that Sid pointed out to her in the puppet show. And Buffy doesn't want to die, giving us one of the most heartbreaking moments in the first season when she tells Giles she's only 16. So she quits. As can be expected, when she quits, when she isn't really at the top of her game, people die. In Welcome to the Hellmouth, it was Jesse. Here it is Kevin and the members of the AV Club, who are found by Cordelia and Willow. Now, in Welcome to the Hellmouth, it was Willow that called Buffy to action. Buffy had given Willow her Seize the Day speech, which resulted in Willow going off with a boy, who happened to be a vampire. Willow, being in trouble, called Buffy to action. In this episode, Willow isn't in any physical danger, but her world has been rocked. Vampires have invaded their space and made it their own. And seeing Willow like this, Buffy is called to action again. We are reminded of why Buffy embraced being the Slayer in the first place, and that is because Buffy is a moral person, and she sees it as an immoral choice to have power that could prevent this from happening and not use it. As I said in previous episodes, she embraces the Peter Parker Spider-Man mantra of, with great power comes great responsibility. So Buffy faces her fear, something she learned in nightmares, and goes to face the Master. In preparation, she goes to see Giles and finds out that the Anointed One is a child. When Giles says he will go and face the Master, Buffy embraces the lesson she learned from Sid, that it is her fight and her destiny, so she knocks Giles out. She finds the Anointed, faces the Master, and dies. Now, in the puppet show, I talked about the importance of the Oedipus scene over the final credits. As I said then, the crux of the Oedipus story is that the very act of trying to prevent your destiny from coming to pass is what makes that destiny happen. And we've seen that play out here. In trying to run from her destiny, a tragedy has happened that has called her back to that destiny, and the destiny played out as predicted. But in this episode, destiny applies two ways, to what's stated in the Pergamum Codex and to Buffy's destiny to be the Slayer. So we see in this episode that the more Buffy tries to avoid that destiny as the Slayer, the more things happen that ensure she must embrace that destiny. And the message here for Buffy is that trying to buck that destiny hasn't worked out well. And when she fulfills the destiny fully and fully embraces it, she feels strong. At this point we get Buffy's power walk, her striding out to face the Master a second time. This is the quintessential scene of the episode, possibly of the whole season. It is done with the Nurse Herder Buffy theme playing in the background, and it is the only time in 7 seasons you will hear the theme song outside of the opening credits. It's important here because it is declaring to us that this is Buffy the Vampire Slayer. This is our hero, and she's here to kick some ass, and she does exactly that, beating the Master easily. What stands out the most in this journey, though, is the contrast of who Buffy is as a person and who Buffy is as a Slayer. And it is not her Slayer side that saves her, it's her chosen family, her humanity and empathy that ultimately enable her Slayer side to come to the fore and kill the Master. Ultimately, the prophecy from the Pergamon Codex was right. The Slayer was killed, but her connection, humanity, never was. And it was that connection that enabled the Slayer side to be resurrected. And it should be noted that Buffy's death here disconnects her from the Slayer line. She is an anomaly. Her death activates the next Slayer, Kendra, but her second death in Season 5 does not activate another Slayer. One of my favourite movies of all time is The Dark Crystal, a Jim Henson puppet movie that contains a prophecy. In one scene, 2 of the main characters, Jen and Kira, are racing along on these creatures called Landstriders, and Jen says something like, the prophecy never mentioned this, and Kira replies, prophets don't know everything. And while the prophecy in The Dark Crystal was fairly straightforward, one of the things I like with prophecies in fiction is seeing the original ways in which authors come up with to subvert the prophecy, so that while it gets fulfilled, it's not as straightforward or obvious as it seems. We've talked about subversion of expectations a few times in regards to this season, and the prophecy from the Pergamon Codex is a whole series of subversion of expectation moments. Now, what's most important about the Pergamon Codex is this.
This is the Codex. There is nothing in it that does not come to pass.
So we're explicitly being told that the Pergamon Codex is infallible, that everything it has predicted has come to pass. Now, Buffy's our hero, our title character, so we believe that Buffy won't die, that they're not going to kill her. So in our heads, Buffy is going to defy the infallible Codex. Our first introduction to Buffy in Welcome to the Hellmouth and the Harvest, Buffy does stop a prophecy. So apart from thwarting the Harvest prophecy, we get a little hint in this episode that prophecies aren't infallible. Prior to this moment, the prophecy of the Anointed from the writings of Aurelia stated that, and the Slayer will not know him, will not stop him, and he will lead her into hell. But when the Anointed came to get Buffy, she said, I know who you are. A signal to us, the viewer, that Buffy is capable of breaking prophecies. So with what we know of Buffy from prior episodes, and this knowledge from this episode, before she even descends into the Master's lair, they are setting us up to believe that she is going to break the Pergamon Codex, that she is not going to die. And we believe this, despite being told that the Pergamon Codex is infallible, because we believe that Buffy is special, that she is different from the Slayers that have come before her. But rather than defy it, it proves to be infallible again, and Buffy does face the Master and die. Not from exsanguination, but from drowning in the pool of water she is dropped into. Now, the whole Pergamon Codex prophecy is interesting because the existence of the prophecy is what brings it to pass. Giles mentions the prophecy and the Codex, Angel says he can get the Codex and does. Giles translates it, and Buffy overhears them talking about it. She tries to run from it, but Willow calls her back to it so that she goes and faces the Master. Of course, as the Master said, if Buffy hadn't gone down there, he never would have been able to feed on her and get out, and Buffy would never have died. And Buffy would never have gone down there if she hadn't heard about the prophecy in the first place. Possibly at some future point, the Anointed One would have somehow got her down there, but as it came to pass, only came to pass because of the existence of the prophecy in the first place. But then Joss Whedon throws the prophecy on its head. And what we get here is a complete subversion of that prophecy, because immediately after, Xander and Angel arrive. Xander performs CPR, and Buffy is brought back to life. And we are reminded once again that one of the things that makes Buffy different from the Slayers that have come before her is that Buffy is not she alone. She has this chosen family, and this chosen family is what saves her. But at this point, the prophecy has been fulfilled. I mentioned earlier that this point was Buffy truly embracing her Slayer power, because she realised that, hey, she just died at the hands of an ancient vampire, and she's still here. She now feels powerful and easily takes down the Master, confident that he can't really do anything to hurt her. He killed her already, and she's still pretty. As Giles said, I should have known that wouldn't stop you. I also like in this moment Buffy's conversation with the Master. The Master says, "You were destined to die. It was written." And this seems like a callback to Buffy's earlier conversation with Joyce, where Joyce said, "Says who? Is it written somewhere? You should do what you want." Showing that, although Joyce had no real idea what was going on, her advice was spot on. A lot of people criticise Xander for how he acts here, but I think that this episode is actually the start of where he grows up and starts to mature. And that is reflected in the tone of the episode, his place in that episode, and his divergence from his usual role. Xander's arc in this episode is in direct contrast to his dream in Teacher's Pet. There he was the hero, and he got the girl. In this episode, he professes his love for the girl and she rejects him, and he doesn't handle it well. In fact, he displays the douchiness we've come to expect of him. Now, to be fair to his detractors, he is really douchey here. He starts off his practice speech to Willow with, "You know how I feel about you." It's pretty obvious. Yes, Xander, it's extremely obvious, and Buffy has never made any move to reciprocate those feelings, despite knowing you are jonesing for her. Which should be enough of a flag or a hint for anyone. But no, he confesses those feelings, then acts like a jerk when those feelings aren't reciprocated. He acts like it's something he deserves, that Buffy is his prize for their shared experience. To add to his jerkiness, he then tries to claim Willow as his backup prize. Thankfully, Willow knows her own worth and says no. Xander goes and mopes at some Patsy Cline, but then gets his shit together. He finds out about the prophecy, and rather than sitting around, chooses to do something about it. And this is where we start to really see Xander's actual heart, and why he represents Buffy's metaphorical heart. He's had a thing for Buffy pretty much since they met. He made his feelings clear, she rejected him, and his first thought at finding out she is in danger is to help her. And this is a pattern with Xander. He will throw himself into danger if it is to save his friends. He did it in The Harvest for Jesse, and continues to do it throughout Buffy. To help her, he turns to Angel, someone he doesn't like and doesn't trust, someone who he knows Buffy does have feelings for, but knows he will be Buffy's best chance. Angel correctly deduces that Xander loves Buffy, and says, "You love her," and Xander replies, "Don't you?" And they put aside their differences to help her. Upon finding her face down in a pool, Xander gets his hero moment. He performs CPR and is able to save the girl. Most notably, he is able to save the girl because he is human, something the vampire Angel is unable to do. By standard tropes, and as per the dream, the hero should get the girl, but that doesn't happen here. Buffy is alive, she feels strong, and she goes and faces the Master alone. It should be noted that Xander has almost no comedic role in this episode. While the episode itself is of a more serious tone than the ones before it, most of the comedic lines are delivered by Buffy and the Master. While Xander's comedic role will return, this episode, the maturation of his character arc so far, stands out as the focus is on his character and not on his comedic role. This episode is important for Xander's character development because it really puts an end stamp on his pursuit of Buffy. He will continue to be a bit of a jealous douche canoe about the guys that come into her life, but he never really pursues Buffy anymore. Going into season 2 and beyond, he starts pursuing and dating other girls. We get a few good developments for Cordelia in this episode. First, she has learned to drive. All the driver's ed classes she was taking back in Witch have paid off. Cordelia comes to the rescue of Willow and Jenny and puts those driving skills to use. We see emotional growth from her. She says she has feelings for Kevin, something she never had for Mitch in the last episode, which raises the question of how much time has actually passed since the last episode. We see personal growth from her. At the end of Out of Mind, Out of Sight, she thanked the Scoobies for their help, then ditched them when Mitch asked her if she was hanging out with the lepers. Here she is actively seeking Willow out. Yes, it's for a favour, but she is walking and chatting with her. At the end of it all, she is talking and chatting with them and goes to the dance with them. They may not be friends just yet, but Cordelia is certainly now at least an honorary member of the Scoobies. Willow shows remarkable inner strength, self-awareness and self-worth here, calling out Cordelia on her flattering lie and refusing to be Xander's second choice to take to the dance, even though she loves him. Like Xander, she shows a tremendous amount of courage to help, even though her world had been rocked by the deaths of Kevin and the AV Club. Most importantly, as I mentioned earlier, it is Willow's pathos that calls Buffy back to her destiny, because as anyone who has seen Alison Hannigan act broken and sad can attest, you would want to do anything to stop her pain, and Buffy does. We see Giles' fatherly devotion and concern for Buffy. He is deeply upset by learning of her death in the Pergamon Codex, and we see the relief that she is alive simply in the way Anthony Head says Buffy at seeing her enter the library. We see Giles ready to take up the fight in place of his charge, knowing full well he will probably die in her stead. This is contrasted with the Master, who sends his charge out to meet Buffy, knowing full well the Anointed could have just been staked. We see Giles' relief at Buffy's resurrection and his pride in her success. With Jenny, we get an indication that she is somewhat of an outsider to this group, in that she holds different ideals, which is perhaps an early indication that she shouldn't have been entirely trusted. At learning of the prophecy, Xander's priority is on saving Buffy, whereas Jenny is, yes, that's bad, but apocalypse. Contrast that to Xander's reaction of, I don't care, I'm sorry, I don't, right now I gotta help Buffy. We see here a disconnect between what Jenny holds important and what the Scoobies hold important, something that becomes obvious in Season 2. Like in the puppet show, we have another case of multiple homicides in the school, where the school isn't shut down, it isn't swarming with cops, and a scheduled school event just goes ahead like nothing has happened. As they're leaving the library after killing the Master, Buffy says, I'm hungry. Is anybody else hungry? I'm really, really hungry. Which is funny, because in Season 3, Faith will say, God, I could eat a horse. Isn't it crazy how slaying just always makes you hungry and horny? To which Buffy replies, somewhat aghast, sometimes I crave a non-fat yogurt afterwards. She clearly forgets this moment. Sarah Michelle Gellar kept the prom dress and showed it off over 20 years later this year. There are a few good quotes in this episode, but I've used most of them in this analysis, so I think I'll go with a quote from Buffy at full sass. I may be dead, but I'm still pretty, which is more than I can say for you. Thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed this look into the Buffyverse, please like and subscribe to the channel. If you disagree with anything I've said, or think I've missed anything of importance, put it in the comments below, and I'll see you next time.